In the autumn of 1453, 6 months after Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks, a chilling message arrived at the convent of the Theotokos in the hills above Thessaloniki. The letter, sealed with the mark of the Byzantine Patriarch, informed the community, led by Abbess Sister Theodora, that all remaining Byzantine territories in the region would soon fall under Ottoman control. It advised the sisters to scatter, to flee west to Venice or Rome, but grimly warned of a fate awaiting those who stayed. What follows is not martyrdom in the old sense. It is something else, something that takes longer, something that leaves you alive. Sister Theodora chose not to share that final, terrifying sentence. The next morning, after prayers, 34 sisters, bound by their vows and faith, chose to remain. 3 younger women, barely 20, chose to flee west. Theodora watched them leave at dawn, unaware of what awaited those who stayed behind. 14 days later, Ottoman forces, under the command of Mehmed Bey, reached the convent. What unfolded, the fate of Sister Theodora and the thousands of nuns like her across dozens of convents in the collapsing Byzantine world, reveals a calculated and systematic method of conquest designed not just to defeat a population, but to methodically destroy its most sacred institutions and spiritual identity. This was not simple, spectacular violence, but a process of bureaucratic, psychological, and spiritual erasure. The pattern of conquest, disorientation, and classification. The Ottoman unit was not a raiding party, but a structured military force operating under specific imperial orders. When Mehmed Bey's forces reached the gates, the abbess was given 3 choices: convert to Islam, pay the jizya tax, and continue Christian practice under severe restrictions, or face the consequences designated for resistance. Sister Theodora, invoking her vows as a bride of Christ, refused to convert and had no means to pay tribute. The assault began immediately. Within an hour, the convent was under Ottoman control. The sisters gathered in the courtyard. The first night was a calculated psychological assault. The women were held under guard, forbidden from their chapel in cells. Soldiers systematically searched the convent for valuables and, crucially, for documentation, while burning religious items considered heretical. They were forced to witness the desecration of their life's dedication, subjected to deliberate disorientation and demoralization. On the second day, the systematic processing began, mirroring broader Ottoman policy toward conquered populations. The nuns were separated into groups based on age and apparent health, a methodical categorization designed to maximize their value to the empire. The eldest group, over 50, deemed too old for certain purposes. This group, which included the 56-year-old Sister Theodora, was given one final opportunity to convert. The younger group, 15 to 35, considered the healthiest and of childbearing age, these women were deemed valuable assets for conversion, ransom, or servitude. The fate of the eldest, slow erasure. The eldest sisters all adamantly refused to convert. Her response was recorded: "I have been Christ's bride for 34 years. I will not abandon him in my final years to purchase a few more breaths of air." Their punishment was neither execution nor torture. Instead, they were confined to a damaged section of the convent, given minimal food and water, and essentially left to die from deprivation. This was a calculated cruelty designed to avoid creating symbolic martyrs while still eliminating resistance. Sister Theodora died 17 days after the convent fell. She and the other elderly sisters who followed over the next few weeks were buried in unmarked locations. Their deaths were euphemistically attributed in Ottoman records to natural causes following capture, a bureaucratic signature of systemic erasure.
The fate of the young, psychological and physical breaking.
The 23 younger sisters faced a fate that historical sources suggest was considered worse than death. They were prepared for transport to Constantinople, deemed valuable assets to be processed by higher authorities. The march and humiliation. Before the 12-day march began, the women were stripped of their religious habits. Their heads were shorn or uncovered, and they were bound together like prisoners. The journey itself was part of their psychological breaking, paraded as visible symbols of defeated Christianity. They were given minimal sustenance and were forbidden to speaking to each other or praying aloud, with guards punishing even silent gestures of comfort. The sorting center. Upon arrival in Constantinople, they were taken to a sorting and evaluation center, where scribes compiled registers of their names, ages, skills like literacy, and family connections. This bureaucratic precision highlighted that the women were considered assets to be processed, not simply resources to be carelessly destroyed. The Imam's test. The women were then subjected to daily sessions with an imam, an Islamic scholar whose approach was initially gentle and persuasive. He emphasized the continuities between Christianity and Islam, stressing the practical benefits of conversion, freedom, potential marriage, and protection under Islamic law. The combination of theological arguments, implicit threats, and the grinding pressure of uncertainty aimed to identify who might be broken. 3 of the 23 sisters eventually converted after 6 weeks of pressure. They were given new Islamic names, transferred to Ottoman households, and their Christian identities were officially erased. Intensive methods for the resistant. The remaining 20 sisters who refused all inducements were moved to a prison-like facility. The goal of this phase was not to extract information, but to wear down resistance through the grinding misery of confinement, isolation, minimal light, subsistence food, and the prohibition of any Christian prayer or ritual. The aim was to make conversion seem the only rational choice to end continuous suffering. Some women broke under this extended pressure, accepting Islam out of despair. But the majority, including most of the sisters from Thessaloniki, did not.
Ransom or servitude, the final disposition. For the absolutely resistant, Ottoman policy offered 2 final possibilities: ransom or permanent integration into Ottoman society. Ransom and release. The Ottoman Empire ran a sophisticated ransom system, setting high prices for nuns who often came from wealthy or influential families. Over a period of 2 years, 5 of the sisters were eventually ransomed by their families or Western religious institutions. These ransomed women made their way west, their fragmented accounts providing some of the only detailed information about the captives' experiences. Enslavement and erasure. 12 of the original 23 sisters were never ransomed, their families unable to pay or untraceable. For these unredeemed captives, the empire dictated permanent integration through enslavement or permanent imprisonment. They were dispersed into various Ottoman households for domestic service. For former nuns who had taken a vow of celibacy, this form of servitude was psychologically devastating. They were forced to exist within a Muslim religious context, required to show respect for Islamic practices, and lived with the constant, explicit possibility of forced marriage, the ultimate violation of their most fundamental religious commitment. these 12 unredeemed sisters from Thessalonica vanished into the system of household servitude. Their documentary trail ends after their transfer, joining the anonymous mass of enslaved Christian captives whose individual fates went unrecorded and whose Christian religious identities were systematically erased from the official record. The scope of systemic policy. The fate of the Theotokos convent was not unique. This systematic process was applied to hundreds, possibly thousands of Christian nuns across dozens of convents as Ottoman expansion rolled across Byzantine and Balkan territories during the 15th and 16th centuries. Trebizond, 1462. 7 convents housing approximately 130 nuns faced the same choices, with many disappearing into Ottoman society. Albania, 1479, and Herzegovina, 1498. Reports from the time indicate the capture of dozens of nuns, with some families tragically choosing to kill their daughters who had become nuns, rather than allow them to face capture and the associated fate. Hidden resistance and the modern discovery. While outwardly the system appeared successful, modern archaeological and archival research reveals a hidden truth: secret resistance. In 1998, renovations at the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul revealed a small, forgotten chamber in the servants' quarters. The stone walls were carved with crosses, Greek letters, and Christian prayers, evidence that enslaved Christians, likely including former nuns, had created hidden spaces to maintain their faith. Their archival discoveries confirmed this, describing the punishment of Christian women in palace service who were found conducting prohibited rituals in hidden chambers. These women secretly baptized their children and maintained Christian names alongside their Islamic ones, demonstrating a determined refusal to allow the complete erasure of their spiritual identity. This was a resistance of the soul, a quiet, persistent defiance against impossible odds. The story of the captured nuns of the Byzantine world is not just a tragic episode, it is a profound lesson in how conquest operates on the psychological and spiritual level. It reveals the calculated methods an empire used to subdue resistance by attacking the very concept of Christian religious life, forcing a choice between the spectacular martyrdom of the past and the slow, systematic destruction of identity and soul that was the preferred method of the emerging Ottoman Empire.